50 years ago this week, the MP Enoch Powell warned immigration would lead to the black man having the whip hand over the white man, and predicted it would lead to rivers foaming with much blood. And he blamed coloured immigrants for putting pressure on housing, schools and hospitals. Last weekend, the BBC broadcast in full the unapologetically racist and bigoted Rivers of Blood speech for the first time. Although the speech was interspersed with analysis, the decision sparked outrage. But I wholeheartedly support the BBC's decision. Why? Because those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. We're seeing the same Powellite playbook driving policy today. Look at the Windrush deportations or the anti-immigrant rhetoric you hear from the right. It has never been more timely and urgent to revisit this infamous speech.
Rachel, I completely disagree with you on this. My parents came to this country around the time of the Enoch Powell speech. I think my mum was probably about 12 or so. And I think when you look at the way people responded at the time, this was a time when overt racism was commonplace in Britain. Yeah. It was normal. Even so, people were outraged. People were horrified. The majority of British people thought he had absolutely gone mad. And as a result, Enoch Powell was disgraced, his career in tatters, and the man died in shame. So my point is, if he had actually achieved what he intended that speech to do, if, you know, thousands of darkies were marched out of the country, then perhaps, I'm paraphrasing here, perhaps then that would be a speech that we should be revisiting. To me, I have no idea why certain parts of the press are giving this speech as much attention as they do. Because to me, it was something to be ashamed of, but it didn't have the desired impact, and actually, we need to move on from it.
Before I bring in Nick, what I feel really strongly about it is it has made it possible for everybody to actually look at what is happening, not just here, but across Europe. We've seen the march of the far right in Hungary, under Orban, in Turkey, under Erdogan. We have seen, in a sense, the licensing of xenophobia, because the same Powellite playbook is in action, and we have to be able to look at it in order to be able to talk about it and to condemn it.
But I don't think the two are the same at all. And in my opinion, the BBC playing this disgusting speech actually legitimises it. Yeah, but it's not as big a part of history as you're making it out to be, because of the impact it didn't have the impact that he wanted it to have.
Let's just tell you what the BBC say about this, because it's understandably strong views, so we must give them the right of reply. This is from the BBC. Many people know of this controversial speech, but few have heard it beyond sound bites. In order to assess the speech fully and its impact on the immigration debate, it will be analysed by a wide range of contributors, including many anti-racism campaigners. This is a rigorous journalistic analysis of a historical political speech. It's not an endorsement of the controversial views. Before I join in, should we just hear a little bit from the man himself? We go back to this speech, 1968, Enoch Powell.
The sense of alarm and of resentment lie not with the immigrant population, but with those among whom they have come and are still coming. This is why to enact legislation of the kind before Parliament at this moment is to risk throwing a match onto gunpowder.
Said to be the brightest...
We're even showing that. I think we need to be a lot more responsible.
All right, OK. Said to be the brightest of his intake of Conservative politicians. I'd hate to have seen the slowest or the dumbest. Rachel's right, actually. You cannot censor history in this way.
I am not censoring history.
Respectfully, you are, because you're saying this shouldn't be played. As long as it's played in the way that it was contextualised, it had people saying what the impact was, it had people assessing it, dissecting it, because ultimately you're going to say, we better take Mein Kampf away. We must never, ever study that, because he also had some pretty loads of views. We better not really get into Lenin, because that's Pol Pot, not. These are vile individuals with... Hang on, just let me... These are vile individuals with hateful views. But if we decide we're going to censor this bit of history, where does it end, Jude?
Well, I'm glad you've used the examples that you have, because those speeches had the impact that they wanted. The point of those
Didn't
speeches...
it failed on against the immigration bill?
Mein Kampf.
No, but Powell's speech.
No,
it failed. Yes.
My point is, this is what I'm saying. Enoch Powell was once a politician who was considered somebody that could easily be leader of the Conservative Party and PM
Absolutely.
one day. That speech destroyed his career.
Okay, but my point, June, before we hear...
Why are we giving this
Okay, I'll tell you why.
attention we
I'll
are?
tell you why.
People were horrified at the time.
No, June, the point is that the price of the freedom we enjoy now is not just eternal vigilance, but also recollection. Because the things that he talked about, the anti-immigrant rhetoric that he was trying to inflame then is abroad today, as Peter Hain found when he was campaigning in Wales before the referendum.
In the Brexit campaign, on the doorstep, knocking on doors in the South Wales valleys, and it was as if echoes of Powell's speech were coming off the doorstep about, he used this phrase, we're becoming strangers in our own country, or people are becoming strangers in their own country. It was that kind of sentiment coming off the doorstep.
I mean, to have the same, probably unconscious echoes of what Powell said being heard on the doorstep. I mean, to me, I'm afraid what we've seen from the Brexit referendum since is the licensing of xenophobia. And one last thing, this has all made me feel that I not only have to campaign against the Brexit, some of the hard rightism that has emanated from Brexit. But actually, it's sort of
me when you say that.
It's not just Brexit now we've got to fight against; it's fascism.
You can't just look. You can't just say.
No, I'm not looking at
Brexit
you, Michelle. I'm not looking at you. I'll look at Michelle. Right. We have to fight against fascism now.
I agree. We
not
have
just
to fight
Brexit.
fascism.
Michelle.
Can I ask you a question, June?
Yeah.
Did you listen to the speech? Did you listen to the Radio 4 programme?
I didn't listen to the Radio 4 programme, but I've seen this speech many times.
So this is my problem with people that are criticising what the BBC did. Lots of people that are criticising, with respect, including you, are admitting that they didn't even listen to that programme.
No.
Now, I did.
Okay.
And it was an hour-long programme, and I listened to it. And I will hold my hands up and be honest. I've never, ever read or heard the entire speech in full. Never.
You've heard of the row.
Of course.
Yeah,
I've heard of the row. I've heard of the rivers of blood. I've heard snippets, and I've formed opinions. But I'd never taken the time to read or watch or listen to the whole thing. When I did, and I watched this BBC programme, I found it listen to the programme Radio 4. I found it very educational and informative. It went through the speech and it really critically analysed what was said and why it was very, it portrayed it in a negative way. It was critical of it. And I'm not sure that many people would have listened to that and come away going, oh yeah, high five to Enoch Powell, he was right. They wouldn't have done. No, so what I'm saying is, to come back to your central point, I fully agree that the BBC was right to have done that programme, because how they did it was in an educated way.
And Phil, what did you think?
Right, the Enoch Powell thing, for me, you can't just put a blanket over your history. Do you know what I mean? It was said, okay, it was said, and if now people can analyse that and pull some good for it, then for me, every negative carries a positive somewhere along the line, do you know what I mean? So if BBC4 decided to air that and critics have decided to pull it apart, if they can learn something from it, then for me it's a good thing.
Well, I'm not saying that you put a blanket over your history. I'm saying that we give this part of history way too much attention.
But why didn't
It hasn't been heard in full for 50 years.
But we're always talking about it. I mean, hello, whenever there's a right-wing conversation, we always go back to Enoch Powell. We're always talking about Enoch Powell.
Just the bits that the press have pushed to the fore. So now it has been put out fully, and more people are probably going to look at it.
And it's more timely than ever when you have, a Tory conference saying that companies should list foreign workers. And we're having our EU citizens who've lived here for many years being told to prove they've lived here and worked here.
I'm fine to be on my own.
Without the analysis, I would be with you. This is about freedom of speech, my friends, but I'm afraid I'm curtailing all of that because we are moving on.